Thank you for making the arrangements that we can meet today to have very important questions to be answered. So I would give it to David Shireda, our superintendent, to take over the session. Thank you so much.
Okay, did you hear that? I had a message to unmute myself, so I'll start over in case you didn't hear that. Good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you to all who are tuning in on Zoom as well as watching on YouTube, and the folks who are also going to be watching this asynchronously if this does not fit into your daily schedule as a live event. We set up a PowerPoint not because I love PowerPoints and not because I think the community needs another PowerPoint presentation, but to try to organize some thoughts and display some information to get the conversation started this evening. I wanted to start out, first of all, Brad, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, I already said that. Next one. Clearly, there's a lot going on at Einstein with our students both learning in a distance format as well as in phase 2 in a limited face-to-face capacity. We, however, in the interest of time, decided to focus on the big question, the elephant in the digital room, which is reopening. So I just wanted to put that little asterisk next to this evening that if we had hours and hours to talk, which we don't, we would be discussing a lot of the good things that are going on in classrooms virtually, as well as the process going forward for the future Einstein High School, et cetera, the IB authorization visit on the elementary campus. We could go on and on, but tonight we'll be focused more narrowly on this question of reopening. So we thought we would start out, and by the we, the we is really referring to myself and Greta Bowders and Andy Trackus. Our history from March of 2020 until now, it seems like decades ago, but we actually in late February of 2020 got word from some of our partners in China of this mysterious virus that was having a really big impact on China before it ever became a topic of the news here. And so we actually had a little bit of a jump start on this compared to some other organizations. We were able to put together a distance learning plan, and we were up and running in some capacity with just a few days of within a few days of having to close our doors to in-person learning. And at first we thought, well, we'll just make it to spring break 2020 and reevaluate. Well, I don't need to tell you that, that we made it to spring break and things only got more challenging. We committed to summer school. We held summer school in a hybrid fashion with students on both of our campuses attending part of the day for part of the week, and not due to any outbreaks of COVID at either of our schools, but due to the conditions in our county. We had to pull back and close down. So we didn't make it through our entire summer school trajectory that we had planned. We subsequently put together an AEA teaching and learning plan that included 4 phases. And we were started out with phase 1, which is entirely distance learning for all students. And then in October of 2020, the AEA Board of Trustees authorized a transition into phase 2, which is where we find ourselves today. That's with approximately 60 to 65 students across both of our campuses. And these are students for whom the distance capacity was the least tenable. It was the most urgent that we met them in a face-to-face setting. We, in the trajectory from October 2020 until January, saw a spike in contagion rates across both our county as well as the state. And so I remember very wistfully, we were talking in September and October about case rates hitting, are they going to reach 7 per 100,000? They were like at 3 and 4, and everyone was wondering about 7. Well, they went from 7 all the way up to 70, and that's when we went deep into purple. And then we've been thankfully decreasing. We're still in the purple tier, which indicates widespread risk as per the state of California. And as of early this morning, we're at 15 per 100,000. In the interim, the state passed some guidelines. Brad, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, well, the state passed some guidelines that indicate when elementary and middle schools can open in terms of case rate numbers, and so we'll get to those in a future slide. A couple things I want to acknowledge before we get into numbers and case rates and plans is that this has had an incalculable toll in terms of pain and suffering for our AEA community, for San Diego, for our state and our nation, and for the world. And there's obviously the health side of it. There's the economic side of it. There's the disconnection that families and students and staff are feeling. We know that social emotional well-being is of utmost concern, not only for students, but also for adults. And by adults, I don't just mean our staff, I mean our parents and our community as well. There's concerns about academic achievement and falling behind, and there are a lot of fears. And these fears, some of them are the predictable fears, and some of them are unspoken. And so I really wanted to honor that before we start launching into specifics about dates and about case rates and percentages, is that we acknowledge that this has been incredibly impactful for all of us and completely unanticipated. There are questions about vaccines later on. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about what we know and also what we don't know. But I would also like to acknowledge that there are still many things that we can't control. And so as we move forward through this, I'm sure that we'll have some questions that'll prompt conversations around timelines and health regulations and willingness of staff and students to return or not. There's a lot still that is up in the air. And so this is not just a straight line from A to B to C, it's a jigsaw puzzle. And there are many pieces that we're not sure where they fit yet. And there are many pieces where we're not sure the piece is even yet in the puzzle box. Next slide. So you can see, and I here I'm pointing, but I don't have the cursor. In order for elementary schools to be considered for reopening, one of the conditions is that the case rate needs to drop below 25 per 100,000. We're at 15 now, so we've fallen into the range where elementary schools are that's one of the conditions for them opening. We'll talk a little bit down the road about what some of the other conditions are. For secondary, middle and high, that number is 7 or fewer. So we're still above that, but the rate has been dropping and it looks promising. So these are topics that we need to discuss. Next slide. And this is pretty arcane calculation about how the county arrives at this daily case rate. And so we'll put this slideshow up on our website if you'd like to dig into it after, but it's a lot to go through right now. If for those people who like to get into the data, you can check this out later. Next slide. So from March 2020 until now, and I don't say this tongue in cheek at all, I say this very accurately, we've faced question after question about, is there a plan for fill in the blank? What is the plan for fill in the blank? This is a list of the plans and protocols that we've been working on as a staff, not just administration, but throughout the staff since last March. We don't need to go through each of them. Some of them you've received in email. as a parent community. Some have gone directly to the staff. Others go to the local authorities, but it's between plans and protocols, it's 10. It's about one a month. So we've been busy with that, meeting all of the compliance hoops to jump through along the way to best position us to when we get to the point where we can reopen our doors. Next slide. I wanted to just have one little piece in here about communication, because communication is an interesting concept. If communication doesn't reach one person within the community, and any of us are talking to that one person, then that means that we haven't completed our communication job. We've fallen short, right? So I want to acknowledge that. I realize that there are surveys on social media that talk about, I haven't heard from the school and they're not communicating anything. And so that may be the case. So someone might not have heard from us, but I would respectfully submit the following. In terms of communication on meal and tech distribution, these are all the dates of our emails that gone out. That's, I'll count them. I counted them for you. It's 20. On communication around closure, distance learning, teaching and learning plan, reopening, community, board meetings, et cetera, that's 28. That doesn't count 11 board meetings and 22 Friday messages and the superintendent's blog, and also access to the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week COVID hotline on the AEA website. So what I would say is, if there's anyone listening who hasn't received this communication, that they can contact the COVID hotline on either of the websites. You can send in a text message right on there and give us your name and your best email address and cell phone, so that we can put you in our system or someone will reach out to you, because our communication is only as good as connecting the wires so that you can receive that. Next slide. So what can we control? We, as a leadership team and a staff, really tried to look at the things that we could prioritize and begin to check off our lists, even if we couldn't, if we felt at times we were in the middle of a sea and the waves and the storm were raging. So we've invested significantly in health and safety measures on both of our campuses, and I don't need to go in great depth on here, but just to some high-level pieces. We've contracted with an outside janitorial firm that has deep expertise in sanitizing, especially in situations like COVID outbreaks. We've purchased high-end air purifiers for every classroom, common area, and office on both our campuses. We've upgraded air filters on our campuses. We've got high-tech thermometers. We started out with the temporal thermometers that were handheld, and now we've transitioned to hands-off, so you can just stand in front of it. We've got hand sanitizing stations, social distancing protocols. We've set up a dashboard on our website and have case tracking protocols internally, so that you can see almost within up to the hour update what rate of staff and students who are on our campuses in phase 2 have tested positive, and you can see those numbers change as they rise and fall as time goes by. We've now also working really hard, and I want to commend Birgit Schaefer and our HR for continuing to update our staff on vaccine information. I think there'll probably be questions today on today's call about that. The short little blurb about vaccines is that we are committed to providing information and support so that all of our staff have the opportunity to get vaccinated, and that we highly and strongly encourage adherence to the CDC's suggestion and recommendation that everyone as an adult gets vaccinated. Obviously, there's the asterisks of underlying health conditions and consulting with their doctors, but we really want to get to herd immunity and beyond on our staff. We're also, not to be lost in all this, but we've distributed over 100,000 meals to the community and upgraded technology hardware, software, and internet service as we've gone for the past 10 plus months. Next slide. I may ask Kathy Montez to tag team with me on this one because she's our resident vaccine guru, but I'll give it a stab. In late December, you saw that vaccines began arriving in San Diego County, and obviously T1A did not apply to, for the most part, to AEA staff, but now we're in 1B and we're moving very, very quickly. The county Office of Education is working with the health authorities and has actually divided up our county into zones. So depending on where schools are located will dictate in what order educators who are employed at those schools have access to vaccines. So there is no simple answer as to when that starts. I think it's possible that some of our folks will begin getting vaccinated as early as this weekend. But that may not be the case for all of them. But suffice it to say that we continue iteratively to harvest that information and push it out to our staff and support them as best we can. Next, Kathy, did I miss anything on the vaccine front?
No, you covered everything. That's great.
Okay. Next slide. So, next steps. We sent out earlier this week a survey to all AEA families and a different one to all AEA staff. If you haven't filled it out, please, we ask that you complete that. It takes about 2 minutes. We're at about 60% of our families having completed that by best that we can deduce from looking at the data. And really the purpose for that was to try to determine levels of comfort among parents, families, and students, and staff in terms of the prospect of returning in a face-to-face capacity to some degree. And as you might imagine, and we continue to analyze the data because it's not all in yet. So if you want to see the final data, tune into the board meeting on March 9th at 4:30 p.m. We'll be giving a presentation and the final data will be in there broken down. We will make it anonymous in that public presentation, even though when you get it, it asks for your student's name and grade because that's for the purposes of scheduling students when we get to that point. But you can imagine that if we've got approximately 1,450 students across our 2 schools and 140 staff members. And so the answers are going to fall all the way along the continuum from I'm ready to come back tomorrow, even without a vaccine. I'm comfortable with the social distancing, or maybe I'm already back in phase 2 already, all the way to even after I get vaccinated as an adult, as a staff member, I don't know if I'm comfortable coming back. It's going to take a while. So we're trying to be humane and respectful and methodical in that. And that's not to say that we're intentionally dragging our feet on this, but really looking at all these pieces so that we can go through a reopening process in a way that meets the needs of our kids, our families, as well as our staff. There is no single perspective that should carry weight over the others. That's my own personal opinion. We know that we're here because of our students and educating our students. But in order to educate our students, we have to have healthy and happy staff who feel safe. We have to have adults at home in those families of those students who feel safe about sending their kids to school, and then also comfortable when their student comes home that they're not infecting someone else in the household. And so we've really got to look at this thing in a way that's going to require a level of complex thinking that we probably haven't faced before ever in the history of our schools. The principals and I, with input from other staff, are currently working on a presentation for our board that will be up for consideration on March 9th at 4:30 p.m. By the way, I've said it before, I'll say it again. You can watch those meetings live. Go to aeacs.org, click on the Board of Trustees. You can see the agenda in advance. You can submit questions in written form, both in general and then also targeted to certain topics. This will be a topic on the agenda, and we are going to propose a reopening at a date soon to follow after spring break concludes. Okay, the reason I'm not telling you the exact date is, if you think about a 6-week time window necessary for vaccines, because the vaccine that we are going to get in our county, you get vaccinated, you wait 3 weeks, you get vaccinated again, and then you wait another 3 to 4 weeks before you're deemed to be protected. So that's 6 to 7 week window. And we've got to wait until we really are confirmed that our teachers and our staff are getting vaccinated. That's why I'm a little hesitant with that date. But it'll be soon to follow after the end of spring break, provided a couple things. Provided that we can staff our campuses, provided that after we've analyzed all this data that we can put our students in and we have enough families willing to have their students come back, and provided that the case rate continues to drop. I want to make a comment about San Diego Unified, because they are the big player in the room, and when they speak, they get on the nightly news, and we don't. They 2 days ago had an announcement that said, hey, good news, the 12th of April, every San Diego Unified student will be able to return to in-person learning. So on the face of it, it sounds very, very promising. When you listen carefully, though, to their board president, Richard Barrera, who I have a great deal of respect for, he's been a very, very big supporter of Einstein. They say, provided that the county is out of the purple tier, that's one. And two, that all staff have had access to vaccines. So should there be a hiccup in any of those, my professional opinion is that that opening that the district has announced for the 12th, it may be delayed. Now, I'm not a spokesman for the district. I don't play one on TV, but that's my hunch in watching how these things go. That having been said, our proposal that we bring forward to the board on the 9th of March will be similar to what we've talked about tonight, but we'll have more robust survey data in it. We'll have hopefully some comments from parent surveys as well as staff surveys, both pro and con reopening, so the board can get a balanced view of what the community in general is talking about on this topic. And then, as always, we'll continue our vigilance on all fronts as we have since the beginning of this. And I really want to very sincerely thank the team that supports administration at Einstein. It makes my job pleasurable even in difficult times, and makes me able to actually organize my thoughts enough to have a presentation and a conversation like tonight. Kathy Montez in our operations, who is tireless, and I often need to send her a text message and tell her to stop sending out emails because it's way too late at night and she needs to rest. Both of our principals, as well as Birgit Schaefer, Brad Bacchial for tech. Brad's the tech guy behind all this, and you seldom see him, but you know he's there because everything works according to plan. So, and then of course our teachers and staff, and this is the real challenge in this distance format, is it can seem like I mean, we really legitimately have lost contact with other members of our community, both professionally and then just friendship wise. And so I want to assure people that the AEA community is working as hard and as intelligently as possible to protect your children, to protect the future of AEA. and also honestly to keep our employees safe. We had one of our employees, and I think I can mention the name because this has been public and we've talked about it in a board meeting, but Cecilia Cuevas, one of our elementary staff members, and she battled and continues to battle COVID, and she's out of ICU now after 5 weeks and in a rehabilitative center. But that really was a sobering moment, I think. And there are others that I don't even know about, perhaps, in our staff community as well as in our parents. So this has been painful for everyone. And I just thank you for taking the time tonight. Hundreds of participants watching this. And with that, I think I'll land my plane and see if the principals would like to add anything to this before we begin to go into Q&A. Principals.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to encourage everybody, just like Dr. Sharetta, if you haven't already taken the survey, please do. It'll only take a few minutes, but it's so important for us. And just to let everybody know, we're going to be working hard to be able to get as much information that could help guide our decision making. We're doing everything we can to get as much information as possible. So please, if you do get a chance, please take those surveys. It's going to help us. It's going to support us in our direction and our decision making.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. I just want to reiterate what Principal Track has said as well. I think a lot of our work over these next couple of days, even before we meet with the board, is to look at all that survey data and try and, we have grade level teachers that have their own, all our staff rather has had their survey. And so looking at, grade level by grade level, what is the realistic student to staff ratio that we can create using the guidelines? I think one of the things that is outside of our control right now as an organization are the social distancing guidelines that we are mandated to keep within each classroom space, which is a 4 to 6 foot ratio. And so a lot of our work right now is digging in and to see, at a grade level, how many parents want to come back or want their students to come back, and how many staff do we have to support that. And so we are going to be digging up rolling up our sleeves and digging into that data. So as soon as you can get that information to us, that will help us.
So what is the protocol here then? Peggy or Kathy, is someone going to call on people or?
Yes, thanks, David. We will go ahead and open up the Q&A session at this time. Again, a reminder, you can ask your questions in the chat feature. We will have the principals will be supporting answering on those questions, or use the raise hand feature on your Zoom. We do have a couple of hands raised. Our first one for the administration is Seth Torma. And Seth, I'm going to unmute you, and you have the mic for the next 3 minutes.
Thank you. I will not take the 3 minutes. I really appreciate, and I thank the administration for all the work that they've done in terms of the communication and trying to keep the students engaged through this really, really difficult time, and the parents. I understand the challenges that have been there. I want to say I don't want to focus on dates, because I think dates are less relevant than milestones. I am aware of your plan that you published last August, I believe, which was milestone based. I have family members that are friends and teachers, and I completely support the idea of a safe going back to school. And through that vaccination process, I wanted to understand very specifically, and I know that we don't have the answers tonight. What it sounds like is maybe March 9th or later, but the plan does not address vaccines and the availability of vaccines for faculty and staff. So I want to ask the question, once faculty and staff are vaccinated, do you expect to go back? Or will we be in some other, back fully, or do you expect to wait for social distancing? I think Principal Boutros, you mentioned social distancing, which being in architecture and engineering, I understand that could be, infrastructure changes take time, months, years to get into place. So I want to understand that. I understand that we don't have all those answers tonight, but I want to understand if that'll be clear on March 9th or when that will be clear in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer part of that, Seth. Thank you for your comments. We will make a clear proposal to our board on March 9th that will attempt to identify that milestone piece with tentative dates about returning in a face-to-face capacity, even with social distancing measures in place once staff have had access to the vaccines. Now, anything can happen. So I used to try to predict what our board would decide, and I've long ago given up trying to do that. But we believe that we can have a model that somewhat mimics what our summer school model looked like, which was A group, B group, going a couple days a week, having a Wednesday off, for example, to deep clean, and then alternating again Thursday, Friday. It looked a little different on elementary and middle in terms of number of hours in the day, but we recognize the challenges emotionally and learning achievement gap wise the longer we stay in the virtual capacity. And so we would like to at least propose that we ease back into a more of a face-to-face capacity. It needs to be mentioned that the reopening and face-to-face, we kind of throw those terms around, but if you dig down into what the CDC and even what the Biden administration is talking about, by the CDC's definition, reopening is a school is reopened when they've offered the opportunity of face-to-face learning to a minimum of 1 grade level's worth of students. So that's one end of the spectrum, right? That's the minimum end of the spectrum that counts as reopening, all the way up, obviously, to saying to every student in every grade, hey, you can come back in person. And so when we get this survey data, we will be able to have a little bit better idea, survey data from families, but also from staff, about where we are on that sliding continuum, if that makes sense, Seth.
Thank you, Dave.
I also going to address and just add some of the questions I'm kind of monitoring here. Want to ask about, is the initial stage of reopening going to be part-time? And so I want to just address phase 3 of our teaching and learning plan is a hybrid model. That is, if we are going along our phases, phase 2 has been just our limited number of students on campus that were invited specifically. And then phase 3 would be a hybrid model. And that would, right now, due to the social distancing reality and our student to staff ratio, that is our next, as we're looking at phase 3, our next phase that we will be considering. Because of the limitations between our staff to student ratio and our capacity to fill the space. Somebody asked also about the outdoor space. So yes, we have considered all spaces on the campus. It still doesn't take away the staff to student ratio. Hybrid learning is a combination between distance learning and the in-person learning. And all of our teaching and learning is so heavily tech-based now, and that's not even just because of distance learning, but in any of our classrooms before we close down, it's very much an interactive teaching and learning situation with our teachers who are constantly on smart boards and utilizing technology that way. And so for us, one of those challenges of using that outdoor space is actually the digital and internet access and how to, create a teaching space that we can make outside. But we have definitely considered that. We'll continue to consider those as options.
Thank you, Greta. Our next speaker is Matt Lona. Matt, if you could unmute your mic.
I wanted first to thank the school for looking at this so carefully. I can tell from what you have talked about today, Mr. David, that you're leaving no stone unturned. So appreciate everyone's efforts. One thing that I wanted to ask about on the survey, I think it may have been helpful, and you can always do more surveys about when families would like to return. I think the question stated, would you like to return to in-person or hybrid or all in, and I think the reason I say this is because I think that there has to be some consideration to the risk reward benefit of opening with a month and a half left in school, where it's, we still have some cases here where we may be so much better off as a community and a world to open up and be comfortable and be ready to go next school year, versus the risks the higher risks and the less to be gained in that month and a half. We have a kindergartner, and I'm just thinking, we just celebrated the first 100 days of school, and I just feel now, after those 100 days, we've gotten in a groove and things are getting better. And I'm going, oh man, these kids are some of them are gonna have super anxiety going into school with all that's going on, and is there enough to be gained with the risk out there to throw them in for a month and a half and go through all this? So there may be a survey that needs to be out with that question. Would you like to come back? Oh yeah, our family is ready. My little girl is ready to come back, but I don't know if I want to throw her back in for a month and a half of school.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for your question. And I often joke that surveys are expectations waiting to be dashed, and so we didn't want we considered the whole date thing, right? And saying, okay, would you return on or after the 15th of April or whatever? But then we really were trepidatious, because if this thing shifts so quickly, we just didn't want to commit to a date and then have people say, well, I said I was going to come back on that date, so now you have to allow me to come back. So, but we'll note your suggestion. And I think as we get closer to this and actually begin to hypothetically schedule students in classrooms, there has to be additional communication with parents about how comfortable are you with this date, or would you be more comfortable just waiting till the fall? I think it's a highly personalized decision, and that's what makes this so nuanced. And you could have a kindergartner and a fourth grader in the same family, totally different considerations, right? Your fourth grader's been experienced in Einstein already, and they're rearing to go back. They want to go back and see their friends, and the kindergartner's never, doesn't know what that is, right? So their year has been this Zoom. So thank you for that. We'll note that.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Lisa Ashley.
Good evening. I had questions, and thank you, administration and teachers, for all the hard work that you've done. We really appreciate it, as well as the Friends of AEA and everyone who's just pretty much tried to make this a good year for our kids with all the hardships. The one question I have deals with the capacity for distance learning once we do start the hybrid model, and how we can support the kids that have to remain in distance learning and make sure that they're engaged as well, and how that's going to look.
Thank you, Ashley, for that. I think I will segue a little bit to the principals on that one. They're a little closer to the instructional end than I am, and I can support if there are any additional questions.
So we were just having that, thank you for that question. And we were just having that question just a few hours ago with our administrative council here at Middle. And, as one of the parents, Mr. Lona, had said earlier, we've kind of found a groove this time last year, we worked hard at preparing our teachers and supporting our teachers in learning Google Classroom and Zoom. This was in January and early February, we were doing PDs. And I thought that we did a really good job in transitioning into distance learning. And then we dug a little bit deeper and we looked for a little bit more of a robust program. So we worked really hard and brought on Canvas, and I want to thank our teachers because they did a lot of heavy lifting over the summer in preparation for that. So now we found a groove, and we're finding out that distance learning, for whatever reason, for some of our families, there is going to be a reality for the end of the year. And I venture to say that distance learning for some of our families is probably going to be an option for their future. And so there's two different questions that we're preparing for. What do we do short term to make sure that each and every one of our students remains engaged at the highest level, whether that's going to be here and the possibilities of a hybrid model, live, and how do we keep that level of engagement for our students that have been connected? And those are conversations that we're having with our teachers. But looking in the year where we're at, and saying, okay, what's working? What can we do a better job? And how can we stay committed to what we began at the beginning of the year, and making sure that each and every student was connected? I don't see any kind of drastic change if we come back. I don't see a huge shift in what we're going to be doing instructionally. I look at the possibility, and a conversation piece was that, okay, so do our kids come in alive? We offer that human connection, the power of the human dynamic, which there's no substitute for. And then do we continue with Zoom? Do we continue with Canvas? Do we continue with Zoom as our kids have learned and as our parents have learned and we've supported? And do we continue through the end of the year in offering that continuum and that regularity that our families and our students are so used to? So those are conversations that we're having. I don't foresee that it's going to be best practice for our kids to do anything, or our parents to do anything drastic if they come back live or at home. So I think we need to be able to build on the things that we've been working on. And at the same time, too, if we can be able to come in live, we offer a little bit of, we offer that human component, the human connection. But as far as the distance learning piece short term, I see a continuum of what we're doing. I see that happening till the end of the year.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, I think
sorry.
just to answer another part of that, somebody asked, like, what other data needs to be considered? And that's the piece of this is actually looking at it grade level by grade level, sibling by sibling, and trying to create schedules that are working. The other piece is looking at each grade level, and we do have staff who have underlying conditions that we are really aware of and sensitive to, and we have to take that into consideration. And so let's say a grade level has a certain number of staff members who really have some underlying conditions and concerns. We have to make sure that we take that into account when we're trying to match the number of students that we can bring back into school safely with their grade level teachers and teaching teams. And so we know that we're going to have teachers on site, and then people and families who are going to definitely choose not to come back. And so we have to have a robust online distance learning platform, as well as have a robust in-person platform. And so that's the piece that we're really taking the layers off the onion to put those pieces together for safe school reopening.
And long term, we've also advocated for the possibilities of, hey, what are the possibilities if we developed a distance learning pathway, right? So we've been having those conversations because we know that they're going to become a reality. We'd like to be able to keep our kids connected to AEA. And if that's going to become a reality, well, you know, we're open to the conversation of how that could become a possibility. And we've been talking to our local agencies and authorizers about the possibilities of doing that.
Thank you, Andy.
Well, just to say one thing, I really do hope that you do pursue that model, because I know that there are a number of people that have left the area and that, but still want to be connected with AEA because we don't have those as options. So please do continue to pursue that, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. And that's a reality. We have lost a lot of our families out of state, out of the country, right? Who desperately, they felt a connection. We want to keep those families connected if we possibly can. So, we have to look into that, but there's a couple hurdles that we have to jump through. But I just want to let you know that the conversations are happening.
Thank you, Andy. Our next speaker is Ann Matich.
Hi, thank you. So I just would like to say that I've been a part of the AEA community since the school first came to South Park. I believe it was in 2004 or 2005. So I have a long history with the school, and I really love Einstein. My comments are, I have a few comments I'd like to make. I'm a physician who's been working in the front lines since the pandemic began. And my belief is that this virus isn't something that's just going to magically disappear. We are going to be dealing with this for, a long time, different variants and so forth. And we clearly have to adapt and learn how to live with it. I think that we can come back safely. I think that our children, some of our children, I think, are suffering perhaps more than other children, but I think it's obviously taken a huge effect, a huge toll on the parents, on the community, on the teachers, and our children. And I think that we need to do all that we can to make sure that we can get them back to school safely, have the staff be safe. And I guess I'm kind of curious as to how certain schools in San Diego are open full time, and these are not necessarily private schools, but are schools that are in other areas where their children are back in, full-time instruction without any issues. I think that one of the questions that was asked in the survey is whether the parents want to have their children be vaccinated before returning. So a couple comments on that. One is the CDC has not mandated that vaccines be given to teachers nor staff as a condition for opening. And two, these vaccines were not studied in children our age. So that is just not going to be happening at this time. We don't have the data that says that 7-year-old children should get the COVID vaccine in order to return to school. So I think, we need to be aware of what the data is and what the data is not. So I guess my concerns are that perhaps the hybrid model may also not be functioning for some parents, where having a kid go to school a couple hours a day, 3 days a week, or whatever that is, that may actually be more difficult for some of our families than having them be in school either full-time or just be virtual. And then again, kind of wondering how we are different from those schools that are able to be open, that are public schools, and that have been able to be successful without transmission issues.
Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann. And first of all, I want to thank you for your service, and you're one of the unheralded heroes. So thank you. I know that as hard as it's been in our profession, it's even harder in yours these past 11 months. I can answer some of those. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, our survey, unless I misremember it, I think we asked about staff vaccination. I'm not sure we asked about the student vaccination piece, but if we did, that's an error that I'll acknowledge publicly, because we know that they haven't even done the studies yet. I think I saw some indication that by this late summer, there may be some studies on minors with the vaccines. But in any event, I can answer some of that. The schools around the county that are open, and I don't have the names on the tip of my tongue. My understanding is that when the initial decision was made to that many of us made to close, they didn't make it, right? So we kind of had an eye to San Diego Unified as the biggest player in the room in March, and Cindy Martin and LA Unified made that decision in a synchronized way, and we kind of followed along, trying to look at the landscape here in the city. And we had some school districts that defied that. They said, no, we don't need to close. And so they actually remained open. They put whatever measures in place that they put in. At a certain point, the CDC came with a decision that then rolled down to the local authorities that said, if you're not open in a in-person capacity now, because rates are spiking, you cannot open until cases come back down. So playing Monday morning quarterback, that is something that, maybe we would have taken that a little bit differently. Monday morning quarterbacking is sometimes fruitful and sometimes not. But that's my understanding of how some of those school districts were able to remain open in some capacity. One of the interesting things, and I know you know this because you're a physician, that the CDC, one of the reasons that the guidance is different for elementary even than middle and high is that the transmission rate appears to be lower with younger children, and that's only something we're learning now and late in the game. The cases that we've had at Einstein, both among adults and children, none of them, to our knowledge, have taken place on campus. So that's a positive thing. That speaks to the I think efficacy of measures that we've had in place. So that's a positive thing. I would be even more concerned if we knew that cases were happening and there were cohorts having to shut down because one student infected another in that cohort or across cohorts. That hasn't happened. It's all been outside of school, usually social gatherings, and sometimes we don't even know where it came from. So, and then I think to the second part of your question, and I would agree with you. I think there will be those families that, as Mr. Trackus said previous, will elect to just stay distance for the foreseeable future. And if we'd been paying attention to Bill Gates 5 years ago, right, where people were like, he's just a billionaire who's kind of nerdy and he just likes to talk about these things, he predicted that our biggest threat to the globe was something like this, right? And so I think that it won't go away. That's why things like Canvas, we're not going to sunset Canvas just because it seems like things are running smoothly in October, November, December, and more than half of the kids are back and they're in classrooms. We need to keep that muscle memory ready, because if it's not coronavirus, it could be something else. If it's not in 1 year, it could be in 2 years. So thank you for your questions and your comments.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Erica Johnson-Carl.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. So I just wanted to confirm what the physician who previously spoke said. There was a question about whether or not we would vaccinate our kids. And I also was just like, that's a crazy question, just because there is no data to support that this is safe for children. I have a 6 and a 9-year-old that I am not planning on vaccinating. But then my question was, I usually volunteer in the classroom because I live pretty far away. And by the way, the schools here in Escondido where I live have been open, and we have heard nothing about them having cases or issues. The kids are going to school, doing fine. So I definitely am hoping that this school can find a way to get on board and reopen in a safe way that we can have our kids back. But my question is, will it be required that the parent volunteers get vaccinated to be allowed to be in the classroom with the children? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And I'm glad that Escondido is staying safe. We honestly haven't even gotten to the parent volunteer end. We early on in the teaching and learning plan talked about not having volunteers and even visitors, even staff members on campus who are not directly working. So we haven't even gotten to that point yet. But I'll put my neck out there and say that that we would want to at the point that volunteers come back, we want to make sure that it's a safe situation. So if, and again, but I will take that on advisement, and we're going to make a side note to talk about that in our admin team. So perhaps on the 9th of March, we'll have a piece included in our presentation on volunteers.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Tiffany Schaaf. Tiffany, are you still with us? Let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to speak. And I wanted to give a big shout out to Greta, because I know she knows a little bit about what I'm going to talk about and was quick to respond. But I do have to say I have some concerns, especially hearing things like the teachers might not have to return after they've had the vaccination if they don't feel comfortable. As someone who works in the service industry, I feel as though teaching is a service. And once they're able to do so, if they don't have pre-existing conditions, I feel like, we closed because we thought the virus was going to be terrible for kids and for everyone. And now that we know kids aren't super spreaders and that it should be safe for them to return if we take the proper precautions, we need to be talking about the other epidemic, which is the children and their mental illnesses that are coming on. And I know firsthand about this because I'm like shaking as I tell you this. I have a child who we have had to seek out psychiatric help and who had a complete breakdown, who was a top student at the school. And I can tell you that Rady's Children has over a 650 emergency child psychiatric wait list. All of our psychiatrists that take children and accept insurance are completely booked. People who take out of pocket, you're talking $350 a pop when a lot of people are out of jobs, are booked out 4 to 6 months in advance. So I know this just isn't me. And then now my 2 little ones are telling me they're depressed, they're sad. And okay, so there are some people that are doing fine at home. And I know that you guys will find an at-home solution to keep those that have PTSD from the virus. Because I think some people, even once the virus is gone, are going to feel so intense about staying home. But there are children that are suffering. And I had friends who, when I told them my kid was getting sad early on, they said, we're adjusting. And now even them, they're seeing their kid get so sad. They don't want to hop onto Zoom. They feel like life isn't worth it. And my kid is on campus now, but what did it take her to be autistic, ADHD, and to be suicidal? And this is how bad things are. And so I'm really glad that people maybe have family here that are able to help them, or maybe a parent is able to be home. But there are a lot of children that are hurting, that need school. There's a reason I didn't homeschool. Like, that's not the household we are, and we've tried to keep it happy and fun. And again, I know that we're not the only ones, because statistically it's shown kids are hurting, and we need to reach out to those children. And if my other 2 get to a really sad place, I don't know what I'll do. And again, like I said, I know I'm not alone. And Fauci even said we shouldn't wait for teachers to be vaccinated to get back. And we've had lots of articles written about pediatricians and, psychologists, psychiatrists, you name it, saying there is I can't even talk about it. I'm so worked up because it's so emotional. Like, I don't know how you can be a parent and not be emotional about it, but we're creating damage in some of these kids.
I'm sorry. Time is up. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Tiffany. First of all, I want to kind of go back to, that acknowledgement piece at the start of the presentation was really exactly what you're talking about. So thank you for putting a face and a name. And I want to recognize your courage for coming forward on on a public Zoom and personalizing this. I want to clarify somewhat the topic of vaccines and teachers and staff and returning or not. We'll talk more on the 9th of March about the details. But I think that if we could characterize our approach with staff, it'll be similar to our approach with families. We heard a parent earlier talk about, wanting to know the nuances of a return date, and maybe it's not right for their student to come back right away. Maybe they need to come back later in the year, or maybe in the fall. When I mentioned that even if staff get vaccinated, that they might not want to come back, wanting is one thing, but I think the nuances come with working with that staff member, just as we would with a family, to say, okay, where does your comfort level get to where you can come back in person and perform your duties at a level that our children deserve? If we're not quite there yet, we'll support you to get to that point. I don't want to turn this into a community versus teachers or staff piece to where, once teachers are vaccinated, they must absolutely come back right away, simply because we don't know the nuances of each individual's situation. We also have adults having mental health crises related to this, even if they are getting their vaccination. So it's nuanced, it's complicated, it's personal, it's emotional. And once again, we will be and continue, we have and will continue to talk about these things in our admin meetings. And so thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you, David. Our next speaker is Stacy Gingery.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh,
yes,
can you hear me?
Can hear you. Yes.
Hi.
Thank you.
I just wanted to find out about, we know that other districts have gone back to school, like Cajon Valley, and there's a lot of different charter schools that are back. I'm wondering, one, how are we different? We're a charter school. Are we following only what San Diego Unified is doing, or do we, because a lot of times we make choices on our own outside of that. And the second question is, part of it, have you communicated, or are you guys working together with those districts, looking at what they're doing to learn from them, to allow us to open safely so that everyone feels comfortable, teachers, staff, everyone? But we're seeing it's already happening, and we're seeing these children thriving. They're back in school. And, we know that we're going to have a hybrid model. We know that some people are not going to go back, and so those that don't want to will not have to. But I'm just interested to know kind of, why these other charters are open, and what we can do to get ours back in as well, looking at those numbers and looking at those successes.
Yeah. Thank you, Stacy, for your questions. I'm not aware locally within the 50 schools within San Diego Unified of charters that are reopened past a limited capacity, but I may be missing some of them. I think what you're referring to is charters or non-charters outside of the boundaries kind of San Diego Unified. And we haven't yet reached out to them specifically. Some of the reason that they're open is that they never closed. And as I mentioned previous, we made the decision. Hindsight is what it is. Did that decision save did it save people getting sick? It might have. Was it hasty in terms of what we now know about our youngest students? Perhaps. We made that decision to close down, and as rates began to spike, especially after summer school when we were forced to close down, then when we closed our doors in order to reopen, the rates had already gotten high enough that we had to wait until they dropped. And so that's where we're sitting. We're in the same place as San Diego Unified is right now. we're subject to that same, those restrictions, and the ability to operate independently of the district. If we wanted to set, if our board, I shouldn't say we, if our board wanted to set a date for the future and say, we will reopen on that date, assuming that the health authorities allow us, then San Diego Unified could do whatever they're doing, and we do whatever we're doing. So we have autonomy in that. There's also, though, a practical piece to being aware of the fact that we've got families with students both in San Diego Unified schools as well as in our schools. And so that's one piece of it. But, at this point, we can't reopen because of the health indicators. And we kind of got ourselves into this situation, as many districts did around the state, because we made that decision to close in March. And I think some elements of that decision were well taken, and I don't regret them. And others, now that we know about the youngest students and clearly not anticipating the mental health burden that this would place, there's some parts of that were unfortunate.
Thank you, David. We have time for 2 more questions. Our next speaker is Jennifer Coleman, and after that will be Lisa Graves.
Thanks so much, Kathy, and thank you all for having this meeting. And it's just nice to see everyone's faces and the participation. I just wanted to touch on something, David. I know that you've been saying in regards to the plan that will be released on March 9th, that so much of it is contingent upon getting these responses back from the surveys. And I just wanted to say, as a member of the Einstein community that's been on campus for 6 years, I've been there in every capacity I possibly can, from fundraising to running every event I could think of to help the school, and to volunteering, for field trips in the classroom, anything I can possibly do. And so because of that, I do get a lot of feedback from parents. I'm a room parent lead for 2 of the grade levels, and so I hear a lot from parents. And as you guys know, I shared with you some responses that we've had from a survey that we did among parents who have been extremely frustrated. And this emotional mental health aspect, I feel like it's something that we're talking about. I don't know that we're able to dig into how extremely serious it is. And I noticed that on the school survey that went out, there wasn't a lot of room for emotional content like that. I'm sure at this point it's a logistical decision of how this plan is going to unfold, but I just want to make sure that those responses that we shared with you are going to be factored into what you're bringing to the board on March 9th, and that component is something that, even though it wasn't contained in the school survey, is something that's being taken extremely seriously at all costs, because there are a lot of families and situations, personal people that I know and in my own life, that are feeling like catastrophic emergencies. And I just want to make sure that, even though our voices, we couldn't elaborate on that with the school survey, that I know you're waiting for a lot of responses. And I think that's a key component. I know that I wanted to share with you guys, because I'm hearing a lot about it as well. And it's heartbreaking to not only hear what we're seeing in chat and see online, but also just to get the emails and the daily calls and to watch what I'm watching. And so I just want to make sure that's going to be a big factor on that March 9th plan.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I have your email with the survey results, and we are overlaying that with as we get the final results from the AEA survey in terms of the creation and refinement of a proposal that goes forward to our board. I also encourage, I don't know who it would be, but you or multiple people to sign up to speak at the board meeting on the 9th. I think that's an effective way to express what you've expressed here. And so we are taking that into consideration. And I think, we've been talking about a survey for probably a month or so, watching the progression of this. We knew if we surveyed too early, we're not going to get actionable results, right? So because this thing was shifting. And so we wanted to wait, and we sent out the survey not as a counter survey to one or more surveys that were conducted on social media, but simply that it was something that we could, we have the comprehensive list of parents across both our schools. And so we have a system for sending that out, and it's not to discount other forms of survey. So we're really trying to look at all those data points and all the feedback and work that into the plan. I think, and probably the reason we did not include a question about mental health concerns in our own survey is that I mean, we know we're receiving our COVID hotline, for example, is receiving that all the time, as are our staff members. And so we know it's a massive concern. And so I think that's the only reason there wasn't a more specific question about that, but it's not to discount it at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our last speaker will be Lisa Graves. And for the rest of the community that does have their hand raised, you can type your question in the chat feature, and we are storing all of the comments and the questions in the chat feature as well for the future and for administration to review. So Lisa Graves.
Hi, thank you. My question is I just want to understand what the hybrid model means. Does that mean that they'll go like 2 days to all of their classes, and then they'll have, days at home where they'll continue with those classes, or specifically they will go to certain classes on those days? I just want to understand what that means, because when you split it up, it just kind of gets confusing for me.
Greta or Andy, you want to talk about that in particular reference to the individual schools, to the extent that we know?
I guess it would be more for the middle school. So I guess it's not elementary, it's more for middle, because my son's in middle school. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. And if it's just because my child is struggling particularly in a couple subjects, so I just wanted to make sure that if it was just particular classes, that we would have the choice to either choose what classes they do in school, or if it's just an online. I just don't understand the hybrid, how that would necessarily work in helping them.
So thank you. Let me share one of the models that we're looking at as far as hybrid and how we could service, if based on what we're receiving from our surveys, is that 80%, for example, if we use that number, 80% of our students want to come back in a live capacity in a hybrid model. What would that look like? We also have to take in consideration our social distancing measures. So what we could do is have two cohorts, and what it would look like is very much what we did in summer school, where we'd have cohort 1 and we'd have cohort 2. Cohort 1 would come Monday and Tuesday and would go to all of their classes. Wednesday be off on distance learning, and then cohort 2 would come in Thursday and Friday, and they would go to all their classes. So that's one of the models that we're looking at currently right now.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies. I just wasn't sure how that would work.
In this way, we could follow all the social distancing guidelines that's been outlined for us. It gives the kids the amount of space they would need, and we would be able to service approximately 90 students on a self-contained level of the middle. So you have the sixth grade floor, 7th grade, and the 8th grade floor. We looked at that as best practice, and it's a model that we want to build on.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that.
So everyone, thank you so much for being here, for participating in this event today. It was a bit different, but it was a lot of information. We have a lot of questions for you from you guys. Like Casey said, we will store everything. We will review these things, and then particularly we will use these things for future questions and answers. Yes, March 9th, the big board meeting. It is at 4:30. Try to be here and join us on March 18th. That is our friends meeting again. We are trying to keep it also open for everyone. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye open on that, and we will get back to you. And March 24th, it's again the evening with the administration. It's going to be very interesting. These are the dates I have now. And once again, thank you for the administration to arrange this event. It was actually planned for yesterday, but David, he was not available. So he made it happen that he can be part of this. So everyone, it was a long discussion.
Sorry, can I just ask one administrative question for David? Just real quick question. You're presenting at the board meeting that in March 9th. Do you anticipate them voting at that board meeting, or will they delay it to the following board meeting in April? Just a quick timeline, if you could.
Yeah, thank you for that. We're going to agendize it as a presentation proposal with a possible action. So that leaves them the opportunity to take a vote on it. If we just do a presentation under open meeting laws, they can't act on it. And so I want to give them that ability to trigger, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Okay, I think we have more than 1 hour. Thank you so much for being here, for being valuable members of the community. And see you on March 9th at 4:30. See ya. Bye-bye. Have a good evening.